In this video, I'm going to challenge the notion that homosexuality, bisexuality, and all forms of same-sex relationships and their activity is wrong. In the modern world, there is currently significant movement within the LGBTQ+ community to achieve equality. To enable this momentum to continue and advance, it is highly important to challenge one of the most fundamental sources of the marginalisation of the LGBTQ+ people. In the Holy Bible, the human perception is that homosexuality and being gay is wrong. However, in this video, I'm going to revisit these notions and take an in-depth view of the chapters and verses that are given in the Holy Bible that relate to this subject. I will show you that, whilst on the surface the context of the language used may appear derogatory, this is a significantly simplistic view. When this language is correctly translated within the context of the chapters from which it emerges, the indisputable conclusion is that those in denial of their world do not see the reality of it. In other words, the marginalisation of the LGBTQ+ populace is a result of naivety and blindness. Many people before me have provided their interpretation of the verses given in the Holy Bible with regard to homosexuality. However, my approach is very different. I have been studying the chapters and verses in the Holy Bible for 15 years. I do not see a moral discourse that attempts to provide guidance on what is right or wrong for humans. I see a textbook that is written in a language that people do not understand. I make sense of this language using a set of highly effective tools and practices and by adopting new modern day approaches. I am Mr. Cup. My name is Gregory Hayward. This is a very important name. My objective is to reset the human compass and provide a whole new perspective that will deliver answers for all humankind. Right now, it is time to realign human error and provide you with the evidence to do just that for you. So, let's get right to it. In all of human history, the Holy Bible has always been seen to be a media for moral and religious discourse. However, it is so much more than this. Even given the weight of public opinion, it is time to take a fresh look at this masterpiece. In the USA in recent years, there is new movement. Scholars believe that the 4,000 names and places that are given in the Bible have been incorrectly translated and that they carry meaning that has been overlooked or undetected. They argue that the vast majority of these names and places have no evidence of having existed, and that if these words are stripped back to the original Hebrew meaning, then the verse or phrases in which they sit takes on new context. Additionally, the Holy Bible is a highly extensive piece of work with over 1,300 pages, and it is written in a language that people just do not understand. There is considerable controversy surrounding almost all of its central themes, and scholars cannot fathom basic and highly important aspects of its language. You may not believe this to be true from afar, but get into the detail, and that's exactly what the scholars do, and the controversy is rife. For example, the word for God is YHWH. This is thought to be the oldest word known to man, and it is unpronounceable. However, it cannot be deciphered, and hence God remains obscure. Similarly, there is a highly emotional content in the Bible that thus far has gone undetected. So, for example, the simple Hebrew word mayim, which means water, also carries with it a sense of distress, danger, fear and concern, possibly relating to violence, bloodshed, wrath and overwhelming. If this theme of emotion has been overlooked, then it would suggest that translations of its text may be incorrectly reflecting the true messages of the biblical pages, and, in essence, these translations live in denial of these themes. Given these variables and applying their principles, it is time to take a fresh look at the subject of same-sex relationships and how it is outlined and expressed in the Bible. According to the New Strong's Concordance, which is the authority on word usage in the Bible, there are 4 key areas in the scriptures that refer to homosexuality and 6 passages that refer to sodomites. So, let's take a closer look at these. The first reference to homosexuality is given in the book of Leviticus, chapter 18, verse 22. It reads, "Thou shalt not lie with mankind, as with womankind. It is abomination." This verse correlates directly with the further references regarding homosexuality that are subsequently made in the Holy Bible. In Leviticus chapter 20, verse 13, and in the book of Romans chapter 1, verses 24, 26 and 27. Hence, this verse is key to understanding the stance given in the biblical text. First of all, on the surface, this sentence appears to condemn the act of homosexuality. It seems to be stating that if a man lies with a man as a man would lie with a woman, then the former is an act of abomination. In Leviticus chapter 20, verse 13, such an abomination would result in the recipients being put to death. Hence, the act of homosexuality appears to be condemned in the Holy Bible. However, we need to unpick this verse and view it in the context of the chapter in which it sits and review the key words and phrases to establish the true meaning of this sentence. In chapter 18 of Leviticus, God is talking to Moses about the relationships that exist in humankind. Between a man and his wife, their children and all their extended family. The underlying theme appears to be the do's and don'ts in sexual relationships between related people, and then further afield, for example, homosexuality. Throughout the verses, God's terminology focuses upon the nakedness within these relationships. This term is seemingly used as a reference to indicate those who have a right to the nakedness of another. So, for example, a husband has a right to the nakedness of his wife, but his brother does not. Hence, the word nakedness seems to indicate a level of moral legitimacy. However, nakedness does not mean this in the Holy Bible. Let's take another look. We are introduced to the word naked at the end of chapter 2 in Genesis, when the final verse reads, "And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed." This verse is illustrating the connection between nakedness and naivety. The man is Adam and the wife is Eve, and they are newly introduced into the Garden of Eden prior to the corruption by the serpent and the famous act of deceit when Eve eats the apple. Prior to this corruption, Adam and Eve are naked and unashamed. That is, they are pure and innocent and naive of the events to come. Yet the word nakedness derives from the Hebrew word erva, which means shame, unclean, disgrace, blemish. A related term arva means impoverishment and dishonour, and a similar associated root form ara means to leave, destitute and destroy. Hence, nakedness seems to mean two things: innocence on the one hand and shame or unclean on the other. Yet this is because there are two themes running adjacently with this usage. There is the overt position of innocence, whilst the reality is very different. Innocence is the simplistic view given to denial, whereas the reality paints a different picture. In chapter 18 of Leviticus, the usage of the term nakedness is used repeatedly in connection with the word uncover, and invariably the premise is that the nakedness shall remain uncovered. Hence, whilst the term nakedness refers to innocence and purity, in reality it refers to the absence of this, that is, shame, disgrace, dishonour and destitute. Hence, the phrase uncover the nakedness means that innocence cannot be retrieved, whilst at the same time one's shame can be denied. The word uncover in Hebrew is the word gala, which means exile or denude. The word denude means to deprive, bereave or rob. A closely related Hebrew word geled means polish, as in wipe away the dirt. Hence chapter 18 of Leviticus is not drawing up a list of do's and don'ts in sexual relationships between related people and latterly non-related people. Instead, this verse is stating that for humans the list of do's and don'ts is not a reality. It is simply a belief maintained by those who choose innocence over reality, or put more aptly, those who live in denial of the world in which they live. Furthermore, the adoption of denial results in the act of marginalisation. In other words, for those people who cannot deal with reality, they are exiling those that do not fit in with their world, depriving them of acceptance and polishing over the cracks in their own personal naivety and innocence. Hence, the process of denial is highly influential. This denial is then reinforced as chapter 18 of Leviticus progresses. Verse 20 reads, "Moreover, thou shalt not lie carnally with thy neighbour's wife, to defile thyself with her." The adoption of a policy that is, thou shalt not, is wishful thinking at best. The reality of infidelity is that it is a carnal act, and policy is no deterrent to instinct. Hence we may choose to believe in the imposition of policy via thou shalt not, but this is wishful thinking at best, and it flouts reality. The relevance of denial is then reinforced in the next verse in Leviticus. Verse 21 reads, "And thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire of Molech, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord." The name Molech means the king of the Ammonites, the commander-in-chief of the army. The word Ammonites is derived from the root Ammon, which means tribal people, inbred. And this in turn derives from the Hebrew root Ammam, which means to overshadow by huddling together. In other words, chapter 18 of Leviticus is referring to the inbred nature of humankind and the denial of this by a tribal people establishing and hiding behind misconceptions that are created to fortify their yearning for the protection of their own innocence. In the phrase, "Thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire of Molech," the reference is being made to the denial of the tribe who disconnect themselves from the motivation of the king, Molech. The seed is the inherited traits of humans, and the tribe do not have any of these, that is, the traits of the king. The king is the oppressor, and the tribe do not see his motivations. The fire is the relevance to the devil, and hence the deception that leads to the oppression of rule, the unobserved motivation from within, that is, from within the king. A king will act within the best interests of his ambitions, and to maintain his kingdom he needs an army. To win the support of the tribe, the king will advocate popularity over reality. He will marginalise the homosexual kinsman to win the support of the majority, and hence build his army. The tribe is unaware and naive to the king's hidden motivations. Similarly, in the phrase, "Neither shalt thou profane the name of God, I am the Lord," the irony in this statement is that the name of God, the Lord, is YHWH. YHWH is the unpronounceable name of the God of Israel, and the name remains undeciphered in all of human knowledge, or the lack of it. In other words, this phrase is pointing out the ignorance, unawareness, and innocence of humankind. Hence, in summary, the biblical stance on the subject of homosexuality is not one of abomination, degradation, and abjection. On the contrary, the tribal nature of the populace acts with no moral compass. Instead, it acts purely to maintain a strong sense of denial about the world in which it lives. Thus, those in denial of their world do not see the reality of it. In other words, the marginalisation of the LGBTQ+ populace is a result of naivety and blindness that is adopted by those people who uphold an unrealistic view of a world, and a view of a world that does not exist. The word sodomites in the Bible is, as with the inferences to homosexuality, linked to abomination. This is written in the first book of Kings, chapter 14, verse 24, when it states that the sodomites did according to all the abominations of the nations which the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. Additionally of note is that the innocence of humankind is rekindled in the usage of the term the children of Israel. Israel represents the people under the rule of God, that is, humankind, and the use of the word children is making reference to the innocence of these people. Hence, the same themes arise in the verses that applies to the sodomites as those that have been identified as having been associated with homosexuals. You may ask, what is the relevance of the usage of the word sodomite, because it is distinct from the other references to homosexuality in the chapters and verses of the Bible? This is a very good question, and one that is difficult to answer without providing a highly extensive explanation. For now, suffice to say that this explanation will be the subject of a further video. Right now, the word sodomite is derived from the Hebrew word kadesh, and it means sacred person, and it is directly linked to kadesh, which means sanctuary, place in the desert. In the biblical sense, the desert is a wilderness that represents the environment which man does not understand. This directly relates to an associated Hebrew word, kadesh, which means a sanctum and the name of 4 places. This is hugely significant for humankind because it relates to the word YHWH and the home of YHWH being heaven. Understanding this allows the word YHWH to be deciphered, and doing this unlocks the answers to life, the universe, and everything. Now, that is for another video, and I am delighted to say that I have the answer. You too soon will have this. Of relevance right now is that the word sodomite is directly making reference to the lack of awareness, naivety, and ignorance of humankind. The word sodomite, as I said, is derived from the Hebrew word kadesh, and whilst man fails to understand the significance of the related root form kadesh, then by the same token, people who are not homosexuals fail to understand those who are homosexuals. It is clearly evident the Holy Bible makes no connection between same-sex relationships, for example homosexuality, and the inference of wrongdoing. In other words, the scriptures do not say that being gay is wrong. Being a member of the LGBTQ+ community is therefore a right of freedom. Furthermore, the manipulation and perversion that creates a subversive agenda that is directed at or impacts the LGBTQ+ community is unwarranted. Unfortunately, in this instance, the reality of this occurrence is forever at risk of happening. The challenge for us all is whether we want to be the recipient of hidden agendas and therefore the fool of their application. Moreover, the root of the prejudice towards the gay populace is rooted in the denial that exists in humankind, and those in denial of their world do not see the reality of it. This denial is a result of human naivety and blindness. In other words, the marginalisation of the LGBTQ+ community is rooted in the tribal surreality of a world that only exists in fairyland. For me, there is a much greater twist in the tale. In the human social sphere today, the general view is that the LGBTQ+ community equates to about 4% of the population. Similarly, the overriding view of humankind is that we are one breed of hominid known as Homo sapiens. However, today is Tuesday, January the 14th, 2023, and a search of all human knowledge via libraries, internet, etc. maintains the stance that humans are one species. I do not believe that this is true. I believe that man is three species, and that all three are alive and kicking today. Furthermore, the inherent traits of these different species share a variety of sexual behaviours and preferences, and that the LGBTQ+ population exists in a significantly larger percentage of the human society than is currently believed to be the case. This percentage, certainly in the bisexual form, exists in 80% of the human species and not 4%. Hence, the LGBTQ+ is wrongly marginalised. In fact, it represents the vast majority of humankind.